Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Continue the college football conversation, and I do want to talk about a topic that we talk about quite a bit this time of year. That is the college football transfer portal. I know we do a lot of these segments, but as I tell you all the time, these are the moves that are being made in December largely set the tone for the next college football season. Guys are leaving, guys are going, guys are committing, guys are visiting. And you look across the college sports landscape, the portal now is as important as it's ever been. And so what I like to do, once or twice a week, just get you caught up on what happened, the visits, the commitments, the things that you missed. And by the way, I always tell you, this stuff moves fast. It's about 6 o'clock Eastern time, maybe 7:30 Eastern, whatever. You get the point. About 7:30 Eastern time, stuff is changing. Some of it might be outdated, but I'm going to give you the best news as I can in real time. And where I want to start is actually where we ended the last segment. Because in the last segment, we talked a lot about Georgia, all the guys leaving, but hey, it's basic science, right? There's the old saying, what goes up must come down. Well, in the transfer portal, it's like you go in one side, you come out the other. Everybody that enters the portal, in theory, leaves it somewhere else. And so I want to start with a couple of those Georgia Bulldogs because there appears as though there could be a pretty big winner of some of these players deciding to leave Georgia. That is their longtime rival in the Deep South's oldest rivalry, the Auburn Tigers. How about our guy, Hugh Freeze? Okay, so for people who did not see this, we just mentioned some of the big names. One, the cornerback, A.J. Harris, really good player. Entered the portal, I think it was Thursday or Friday, but this was a kid. He was the number 2 ranked cornerback in the class of 2023 a year ago. Played in the first 7 games for Georgia, was an impact player early, kind of got worked out of the rotation late, but he enters the portal. Well, as soon as he does, he ends up on Auburn's campus on Saturday. And so you look at the type of player that Auburn simply did not have before Hugh Freeze got there. This is the kind of kid that, used to be in the mix for Auburn. Brian Harsin essentially stopped recruiting. We don't need to go relitigate the whole Brian Harsin thing, but these are the kind of kids that Auburn needs. I believe Auburn's going to get there under Hugh Freeze. Listen, I haven't gone back and looked it up, but my guess is that Hugh Freeze during his time at Ole Miss would have made a 12-team college football playoff at least once or twice. And as we enter this 12-team era, listen, Alabama's still always going to be on the schedule. Georgia's always going to be on the schedule, and you need difference makers to compete with those schools as well as everybody else in the conference. LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Well, Hugh Freeze has done an incredible job in the high school ranks. Several prominent high school players are committed and expected to sign on Wednesday. But I bring it up because you need help in the portal too, and this kid, A.J. Harris, appears as though Auburn makes sense and Auburn is a potential lead. Thought it was interesting. He is from Phoenix City, Alabama. If you don't know the geography, that is literally right up the road from Auburn, about 20 minutes away. And why I bring it up, one of the top high school players in America, A.J. Harris's former high school teammate, I believe, Cam Coleman, is committed to Auburn. So there's ties between the school. There's geographical ties. Easy for mom and dad and family to get down to see you. Don't know if he plans on taking any more visits, but this would be a big one, the kind of kid Auburn needs. Speaking of Georgia to Auburn, maybe a new pipeline. Jamon Dumas-Johnson. I don't even know if we've talked about him, to be honest. So this kid might be the best. Let me even backtrack. I don't think I was dramatic enough. I don't think I had enough effect right there. So late last week, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, we did talk about it last segment, but I don't know if we talked about it when he entered. This kid might be the single best player in the portal. A superstar at Georgia, a huge part of 2 national championship teams, was one of their best defenders in that national championship run of a season ago when they beat Ohio State and TCU to win the national championship. Well, he entered the portal early this week. He actually took 2 visits this weekend. The first one to the Auburn Tigers. By the way, if I didn't mention it, I mentioned it last segment, but Jamon Dumas-Johnson, 70 tackles last season, 9 TFLs, 4 sacks. Unfortunately, was banged up a little bit this year, but still ended up with 5.5 TFLs. I bring it up. He decides to leave Georgia for all the reasons we just discussed. And why it's important is he took 2 visits. The first to Auburn. Again, Auburn, they just don't have these kind of dudes. And you talk about the kind of kid that could step in, play right away, have an impact right away. This is the kind of kid that could absolutely do that at Auburn. This ain't Bama. This ain't Georgia. This ain't Ohio State. You go in there, you are the alpha. You are the lead dog. He was the lead dog at Georgia, no pun intended. Imagine if he goes to Auburn and the impact that he could have there. It is also worth noting, good friend of mine, Justin Rowland, who works for the Kentucky rival site, he actually put out a report on Sunday that Jamon Dumas-Johnson also visited Kentucky. You talk about the impact that that kind of commitment would have. Now, listen, Kentucky's defense has always been great. Some criticize Mark Stoops. If you want to, that's fine, but you can't criticize the defensive effort. But you get that kind of kid out of the portal, that would be unreal. By the way, credit to Mark Stoops, who has done an awesome job in the portal so far. We've talked about it, but Brock Vandegrift, the Macklin kid out of North Texas, the list goes on and on and on. And by the way, speaking of shout out to Mark Stoops, how about the shout out to Kentucky fans? Mark Stoops, call to action after you lose to Georgia. Hey, we got to get that NIL train working. I was critical of him when he did that, but I bring it up because, listen, I don't think you're competing for a lot of these players if bluntly in 2024 you cannot pay. So shout out to Mark Stoops, but more importantly, shout out to Kentucky fans for taking care of business. By the way, speaking of coaches that have had some interesting comments about NIL, remember a few years ago when Lane Kiffin was whining and complaining about NIL? We're buying players. This is the new world we live in. How did we get here? He said Texas A&M needs a salary cap because they're spending so out of control. Well, Lane Kiffin right now has the #1 portal class in America at Ole Miss, and it's because of major work that he has done the last couple weeks. And again, I don't think you get these kids if you aren't ponying up. And by the way, those are the rules. I'm not complaining. I don't care. Go get your money, young men. These are the rules that we have set up, et cetera, et cetera. So I bring it up because Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have had a very busy weekend. Tyler Barron, ironically, of all places that he played at Tennessee over the last 4 years, emerged into one of the best defensive linemen in the SEC over the past season or so. That was a kid that this past season had 10.5 TFLs, 6 sacks. He ends up committing to Ole Miss this weekend. Also worth noting, Ole Miss also got the best edge guy from Florida. Not even going to try to pronounce his name. First name is Princely. Don't want to disrespect him or offend him or whatever by announcing his name wrong. But that was a kid that was maybe the best defensive player in the portal when he was in it before all these new additions over the last couple days. Well, he commits to Ole Miss on Friday, and so Ole Miss is doing work in the portal. Juice Wells, the wide receiver from South Carolina, he committed previously. Key Lawrence, a veteran defensive back who played at both Oklahoma and Tennessee, committed. They got another defensive back from Tennessee, Tamarian McDonald. So you talk, by the way, Lane Kiffin, 3 guys he has committed who at one point played in their careers at Tennessee. Can't make this stuff up, only in college football. All right, so I mentioned that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss have the #1 portal class right now. You know who's #2? It's the Colorado Buffaloes. And listen, I just did an extended YouTube clip on the YouTube channel if you want a deep dive onto this Colorado class. But why I bring it up is for this reason. It is because I think Coach Prime is actually doing a little bit underrated work in the portal this offseason. And what do I mean by that? It's that, look, a lot of negativity, a lot of heat that he took over these last couple months as Colorado struggled. But why it's important to me, why I think this is all worth discussing, is because when you look at last year and you look at next year, last year he took a ton of kids in the portal. And everybody said, oh, well, he's taking more kids in the portal. He did it last year. It didn't really work out. The difference is this year, I believe that Coach Prime is taking kids that last year I think he had to fill roster gaps and was taking a lot of kids that I don't think he would have taken this year. Yes, you had the elite players like the Travis Hunters, but outside of him, Shador, a couple others, I think there were a lot of guys that I think Coach Prime wouldn't have taken if he didn't have to. I bring it up because this year he's getting dudes that everybody wants. Okay. So on Sunday, Quincy Wiggins, a former 4 to 5 star, depending on what recruiting service you look at, commit to LSU. He is a defensive lineman. We know that defensive line is an area of need for Coach Prime. Was an elite high school prospect, many believe to be the best high school prospect in the state of Louisiana during his recruiting cycle. He ends up committing to Colorado. Also worth noting, I know that wide receiver is not necessarily an area of need, but Colorado on Sunday also picked up a commitment from Cordell Russell, who is a former top 100 player, played at TCU last year, and then also added the Wade twins, who played at Kentucky earlier in the weekend. Keaton Wade is a linebacker who was monstrous for Kentucky this year, 51 tackles. I think it was about 5.5, 6 tackles for loss. And again, I mentioned Justin Rowland, Nick Roush, whoever covers Kentucky football, follow them and ask them the impact that this kid had at Kentucky last year. This was a kid the staff did not want to lose, but he ends up leaving. He ends up entering the portal. He had a lot of interest from a lot of big time schools, and he chooses Colorado. His twin brother, Destin, who's a quarterback, will now be the backup at Colorado as well. They also got a commitment from Preston Hodge, an elite defensive back. So that's what stands out to me about Colorado. Just spent a ton of time talking about him on the YouTube channel. But I bring it up because now they are getting guys that everybody wants. Last week, it was the offensive lineman, Matthew Bedford from Indiana. That was a kid that Auburn was desperately after. Khalil Benson, also from Indiana. A lot of people were after him. And so I just bring it up to very simply say, Coach Prime's getting dudes that people want. Now, it's on him to take them to the next level, but I think he will. 1-11 to 4-8. Next year's roster is no doubt going to be better. And lastly, let me say this. He ain't done yet, man. Signing day is coming on Wednesday. I know he's got a trick or two up his sleeve. The portal, I don't think he's stopping until that portal shuts down. He's going to keep trying to upgrade that talent. I think the cool thing is with the portal, so many of these guys are going to come in over these next few weeks for winter workouts. So you get everybody in, you get this process started. I actually can't wait to see what Colorado looks like in 2024. And then I think the important part is too, you don't have to be quite as aggressive in the spring cycle if you do enough work here in the fall. Couple other notes before we get out of here. One, Kyle McCord. By the way, shout out Torres. The day Kyle McCord, he was Ohio State starting quarterback. The day he entered the transfer portal, I said 2 schools. I said, I've heard from sources. It'll either be, I didn't say it'd be either or, but I said Louisville and Syracuse were 2 schools that made sense for Kyle McCord. A couple days later, Louisville takes a commitment from a kid named Tyler Shuck. I'll be honest, I don't really like that commitment for them. Jeff Brom's done a lot of good stuff. Don't agree with taking him as your quarterback because that's a kid that has an injury history. But on Sunday, Kyle McCord committed to Syracuse. Think this is a good fit for him. This kid, 24 touchdown passes at Ohio State. I think he's going to be good in the ACC. He's not elite. He's not CJ Stroud. He's not Justin Fields. But he's not as bad as Ohio State fans make him out to be either. And so I think it's important. Remember, the new Syracuse head coach, Fran Brown, is a monster. Was an assistant at Georgia, but he's from the Northeast. He has recruited very well for Georgia. All those Georgia players from Pennsylvania. They got a few kids from Rhode Island, New York. I don't know if they have any Connecticut kids. Need some Connecticut kids, Georgia. But I bring it up because he is now the head coach at Syracuse, and they are already doing work. Zeed Haynes, a former 4-star wide receiver who began his career at Georgia, just committed. Texas A&M, a couple of their players were on campus this weekend. Of course, the new Syracuse defensive coordinator is Elijah Robinson, who was Texas A&M's defensive line coach. Point I'm trying to make, Syracuse is kind of one of those teams to just keep an eye out on because they are very, very interesting going forward. Going to see really quick, make sure I didn't miss anything. You know, Malik Murphy, the backup at Texas, he entered the portal. He's already got visits set up to Duke. He's got Duke, Baylor, and Oregon State, I believe, were the 3. Those are the 3 that he is going to visit. Let's see what else. Who did I miss? Dante Moore was on campus at Oregon this weekend, so we'll see what happens there. I think that's it. A lot of good portal news. We'll probably do another one of these later in the week. National Signing Day is coming. A lot of recruiting. But if you love college football,